Well, good morning. We're ready now to make the shift. The process that had taken several decades of grooming Louis, the person, the body, my communication device, had come to fruition by the end of 2008. That process of healing, of development, transformation had been complete. So Louis found himself back in Minnesota. He decided to settle in Stillwater, first staying with his best friend, Robin, and then eventually finding his way. He had a small gig as a chef in a nursing home across the river in Wisconsin. But the important thing was that Louis was fully on his mission of service. He wasn't any longer actively facilitating classes in A Course in Miracles, but he had a new idea for a class that had started back when he was still down in Asheville, focused on Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth, the evolution of consciousness. So he was facilitating this class. Robin was in the class, as well as a woman, Cindy Sinclair. And it was interesting that Louis was curious about Cindy. She'd shared some things about her life. She lived on this renovated farm, built back in the 19th century, turned it into a flower farm, and slowly it was becoming a venue for weddings, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, Louis just was invited by Cindy to come visit her, have the class in her kitchen with a little fireplace. Very, very, very lovely place. And this was in the winter. So they're sitting by the fire and having a chat. And it just sort of struck Louis to ask Cindy if she was interested. He made a proposal that he could work for her as like the property manager. Louis had his experience with plants, landscaping. So he could be like the caretaker of Camrose Hill, name of her property, working half the year from early May until early October, which is basically the growing season in Minnesota, and then take the other 6 months to begin his exploration, because Louis realized after his adventure looking for a place in USA, Asheville, North Carolina, Sarasota, Florida, Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, that it wasn't happening in USA. And so Louis just had the sense that he was supposed to head south. He had this idea, and actually he had been just for a few months the previous winter. When he was in Florida, he parked his car, left his things with some friends in Florida, and flew down to Costa Rica. And so it occurred to Louis that Latin America was going to be a more open, favorable, supportive environment for Louis to eventually find his oasis center for conscious living. So he offered this proposal to Cindy. She accepted. Louis could fashion an apartment in this old barn. And basically live for free and save all his money that he would earn with Cindy over the year for travel expenses. So, so this began a lovely process that they had made an original contract idea for 5 years. You know, Cindy liked the idea of having someone long-term, not having to find new help every year. So Louis committed to that. And they began. So I'll share some photos of Camrose Hill. It was kind of like Amherst, Massachusetts had been. It was a real cocoon, a real lovely place. For Louis to be, to live the simple life. You know, he said he had this place in the barn, he had electricity, but no running water. So part of his ritual every day was to walk down to the well. It was like 53 steps. So Louis even had this little mantra about the 53 steps, just again, focusing on chop wood, carry water. It was lovely. This would become a real core part of his personal spiritual practice, chop wood, carry water. And as it turned out, a big part of his job, other than mowing the lawns and tending the gardens, was harvesting firewood. There were a lot of box elder trees there that grew very fast, and these things really needed to be cleaned up. So that was a big part of the job, was cutting down trees or cutting up fallen trees and stacking wood and drying it. So the weddings in the summer, and each year, I mean, Cindy's business really grew. I think the first summer he was there, she had like 8 or 10 weddings, and by the time he left 6 years later, she was up to 40 something weddings every summer, basically 2 every week, at about a 20-week season. So it was it was quite a thing. So that was Camrose Hill. And then Louis' exploration, he went back to spend a full winter in Costa Rica, and the following year, first in Costa Rica, then he went to a little bit of time in Ecuador, spent some time in Colombia. The next year, he spent the full winter in Colombia. Again, just realizing, especially now that he was in South America, that there was really something to South America that appealed to him a lot, and especially the Andean highlands that began in Colombia, went all the way down through Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina. He was very drawn. He had written this book in 2008 about the vision that he had, sort of guided by me to visualizing the last 100 years of Homo sapiens as a species. And so, and when he was researching this book, The Third Pulse, he was intrigued. He actually called the event of the Beatles, 1967, Summer of Love, the event, the one world presentation of all you need is love. Anyway, he saw that as like the second pulse. There would be these three strong pulses that started in 1932, 1967, and then in the future, in this period from 2019 to 2032. Anyway, they just mentioned that during the writing of this book, this is when he did the research on the Beatles, and he was struck by this one particular album that had Here Comes the Sun. Also had this short little cryptic piece, Here Comes the Sun King, that people at the time were talking about if you played it backwards, it was sort of a very intriguing bit that they planted in this album. And of course, the Beatles being what they were, Louis really saw them as being this very powerful portal through which this energetic pulse would come. That would be, the beginning of this new earth that would again fully blossom 50 years later. But when Louis researched the Sun King, he just thought, what are they referring to? And he looked it up, and the first most popular use of the name Sun King was with Louis XIV, King of France. Louis was intrigued with that, did a little research on Louis XIV. Turns out they share the same birthday, September 5th. And so it just kind of resonated with Louis, like, wow, okay, some coincidences here. I guess I would use this name, Sun King, because it was becoming clear to Louis, especially teaching Eckhart Tolle, that, again, his function, any human's function, the highest function, would to be a conduit, a portal, a bridge between heaven and earth, and that being that one of Eckhart's most brilliant contributions was naming God the unmanifested, and this to me, for Louis, was a huge insight into looking at the relationship between the divine and earth, that the unmanifested was seeking manifestation, was seeking expression. And that, and again, Course in Miracles that had always taught Louis about this being the function, that we were to be, each individual potentially, if they became self-realized, they would recognize this energetic function being the conduit through which the unmanifested from the timeless realm would manifest in the space-time world, bridge between heaven and earth. So Louis became comfortable with this name, Sun King, and very important in his journey in South America was his visit to Machu Picchu. Louis was there 2 days, hiked in both days, and first day climbed the sacred masculine mountain, the Machu Picchu, and then the second day spent time in the village, the more feminine part of Machu Picchu. Anyway, Louis had a very powerful revelation about that the oasis was meant to be in this region, either the Sacred Valley of Peru, or as it turned out, he would end up choosing the northern tip of the main Inca Trail, which is Ingapirca in Ecuador, outside of Cuenca, Ecuador. So, so little by little, the pieces came together, and the first time in 2013, Louis rented an apartment in Cuenca. He'd never been there, just sight unseen. He traveled there and spent that first winter there. He had agreed to spend one more year back at Camrose Hill, 2014. And Louis, actually, before he left Cuenca in spring of 2014, he found a country home he arranged with the owner. It was under construction that he would rent it in October when he came back, October 2014. So that was really the official time that Louis anchored himself, 2014, October. in Cuenca, Ecuador, and of course he never left. Took him 6 years really to find the place where he is now, and share more about that later, where the Oasis Center for Conscious Living fully flowered here 30 minutes outside of Cuenca at this really beautiful place in Hadan. So that was the whole journey, which again took Louis decades in the USA. Took him about 12 years total, 6 years exploring where, being drawn to Machu Picchu, being drawn to the Inca Trail, being drawn to, because part of it was the prophecy, which I'll mention today and maybe talk a little bit more about next time. But the prophecy in ancient indigenous prophecy shared by shamans, both in Andean South America, in Central America, and in the southwest of North America. The prophecy was this: it said, when the eagle flies with the condor, it will signal the birth of a new earth. And again, when Louis was in Machu Picchu, this was the revelation he had. It was about the eagle flying with a condor, recognizing the eagle representing North America. What Louis saw was this potential that for awakened North Americans like himself to travel to South America and integrate with the culture of South America, the Andean culture of South America, that's primarily in Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, that this would literally signal the birth of a new earth. And so, just like in earlier times, Louis had ventured, because 50 years before, it appeared that the spiritual hub of the world was in Rishikesh, India, or somewhere in Asia. This is where spiritual wisdom originated, was in Asia, that the full flowering now of a new earth would actually be in Andean South America. And so this is what Louis believes to this day. I concur. It seems very likely that, again, what you see is that if you follow the guidance that's available to you, you will be shown how, where, why, what. You'll be shown the full flowering of your own particular individual contribution to this new earth. Now, it can happen anywhere in the world. Of course, this is a global event, this new species flowering on planet Earth, okay, Homo spiritus, Homo glimulus. It will flower all over the earth. But Louis was guided as a leader of this birthing new earth, guided by his higher self, me, Sun King, that his body and person were given fully. This is again the secret, that he was willing to give his body and his person fully to this cause, this purpose, this function. So because of this, Louis became the perfect portal, okay, for me. Again, I'm a splinter of the unmanifested. There's 7 sort of core representations. But the point is that one of these splinters would fully flower in the Andean highlands of Ecuador. Okay, and the possibility, there's still this possibility that in the future, the community, as it would grow, would shift to the Sacred Valley of Peru. So it's probably enough for today, but again, the key is, again, watching the way in which the evolution of consciousness would guide Louis, okay, via this splinter, Sun King aspect of the unmanifested God, okay, and Okay, the simple point is the removal of interference patterns, both in the individual, the body person, but also in the environment. Okay, the culture of Andean South America is as supportive as any culture, any place that Louis ever could have imagined. Okay, and this is what he experienced here, that he could be in his process of full flowering with very little interference from outside elements. Okay, and we'll share a little bit more about the details of that in our next and sort of final presentation about this process, about how the individual, once called, answering the call at 21, would be guided through a long series of processes that would involve removing interference patterns from the person, the body, the person, but eventually also the environment. Okay, a new earth requires that all aspects, okay, all aspects, what's manifesting would be a fully supportive environment where, for instance, part of the idea of living in community, which is a New Earth core principle, living in community, is that each individual member of the community is supported to give their highest creative expression to the world. Okay, so the environment, okay, literally how you acquire food, housing, clothing, the basic needs to take care of the body, and the person, creating an environment where the body and the person has little stress, has little requirement, has little distraction. So the body and the person is, taken care of. So the body and the person can be fully available to serve as this creative portal, conduit, bridge between heaven and earth. We are literally creating heaven on earth. And so all elements of that creation will come into alignment. And that has happened here outside of Cuenca, Ecuador, in this beautiful paradise. And we can talk again more details about that in the future. I'll give one more presentation, and then Louis can take over with more of the shenanigans, the aspects of what you as people, okay, it would behoove you to follow in his footsteps and create similar circumstances so that you similarly can fully flower, fully be about your function as the expression of the unmanifested. So Sun King sends total blessings, total love, supporting you in your journey to find your full flowered garden, oasis, whatever. Love you.